Welcome to 21st Century Faith. 21st Century Faith is a program brought to you by Aspect Ministries and features topics and guests that explore contemporary ways of reaching younger people and unchurched adults with the unchanging good news of the gospel. Now here's our speaker, the founder and director of Aspect Ministries, pastor, teacher, and author, Mike Bogart.
Hello and welcome to 21st Century Faith. So glad to have you with us tonight. I know that many of you tuned in because we sent out those email blasts and Facebook postings, and some of you tuned in last week, and we're really grateful that you tuned back in this week. Thank you for your support, and we hope that you won't be disappointed in watching and taking the time to be a part of our show. Some of you are tuned in because you just happen to be on this website watching right now. You don't have any knowledge about 21st Century Faith as a program, but I want to explain, just as I did last week, a couple of reasons why I think this show is different and why I think it really merits your time. First of all, 21st Century Faith is sponsored by Aspect Ministries and by Mind Cuisine, which is the educational training arm of Aspect Ministries, Mind Cuisine. 21st Century Faith is all about how to experience effective Christian faith in the times in which we're living. I don't know if you've noticed, but 2015 in many ways is quite different than 1995 or 1985. Been a lot of cultural shifts, a lot of innovations, and so we're exploring on this show how to be authentically Christian in a very different kind of society than even existed 15 or 20 years ago. Let me say what the program is not. This program is not intended to be critical of anybody. So we're not here to bash anybody. We're not here to say how anybody's doing anything wrong. We're here to talk about general trends, general problems, but we're not here to point a finger at anybody in particular. We also don't mean to imply that we know better than everybody else. We're the only ones that have got it right. You need to come to us for answers. That's not what this show is about either. We're one group of people exploring some ways, along with many others, of how to be authentic Christians in the times that we're living in. Neither is this a forum for generating arguments. There's plenty of those shows around. If you want to see people verbally yelling at each other and picking all sorts of intellectual fights, this is not the show for you. This is a show where we're going to be constructive, where we're going to find some common ground with folks and try to solve some of the problems in the times in which we're living. So we're essentially going to be talking about effective ways to be followers of Jesus Christ in the 21st century. So we'd like to have your ideas. If you'd like to text me, the number is going to be up on the screen. It's 559-905-2621. You can text me at that number. If you text me early enough in the show, we might be able to answer some of those questions or at least deal with some of those comments. Remember, we're looking for constructive comments and helpful comments for this show. So you might want to text at that number, and we'd love to hear your ideas and your viewpoints. One of the biggest criticisms of Christianity in the 21st century is that 21st century is all about Christianity dividing people. And it's my hope that here on this show that we're going to bring people together. Now, not only the people that are already followers of Jesus in their amazing variety, and of course, as many people know, there are lots of different groups of Christians, people who follow Jesus in our times. And this is a show that we would like to, at least in one venue in our society, at least bring those people together. But not only those folks. We want to bring people together with us who don't know that they're trying to follow Jesus yet. These are people who may initially have rejected Christianity or don't think it has any relevance in their lives. We'd like to get their attention and also bring them and include them as a part of what we're doing on this show. So we believe on 21st Century Faith that Jesus Christ is the most amazing person that has ever lived. Not only a great person, not only an amazing teacher and great leader, but we're going to be unabashedly and very traditionally Christian in what we believe about Jesus, even though we're very innovative in some of our methodology. For instance, we believe that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary and lived a perfect life and went to the cross. Looked like a great injustice was being done to an innocent man, but in the plan of the Father, God the Father, he was sacrificed as the sacrifice for our sins and paid the penalty for our sins. We believe that he rose from the dead and that he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So that part of the gospel message, it's not going to change. It's not for us to change. But at the same time, the methodology, the approach, the ways of looking at things are going to be very, very, very different. So let's talk about what this show is all about tonight. While it's true that many people choose not to follow Jesus, we believe that some people make that choice not to follow Jesus based upon faulty or incomplete information. One of the purposes of this show is to help people have a bigger, truer picture of who Jesus is so that they'll want to follow him and experience the presence and the power of God. Another purpose of this show is what we call civil discourse. Now, remember we talked about this show as not being a place to bash others. Well, civil discourse is all about how to be respectful as we discuss controversial issues in our society. It's our goal that as Christians in a pluralistic society in the 21st century, that we learn manners in how we talk to people. And I will be the first to admit that there are times when I speak for my fellow Christians that we have not had very good manners when we talk to people. This is a show in which we explore ways to learn those good manners while remaining distinctively Christian, and even while we disagree with folks that we have a different point of view with. Well, last week we were talking about the missing millennials, the absent generation that is increasingly identifying itself as non-religious. Been a couple of surveys that have come out in the last 5 years. There was the Barna Research Project, and then recently, just last month, there was the Pew Research findings in which they identified about 35% of millennials. Now, let me define that. That's 18 to 35-year-olds. About 35% of that age group identifies itself as not affiliated with any religious group. Doesn't mean that they're not spiritual. They may have a private spirituality going on, but they're not affiliated with any particular group. That's a third of that demographic is not included in any kind of religious organization. And of course, Christianity is included in that group. And then we also found out from the Barna Research Organization that of those young people who are actually raised very consistently in some kind of church background, and I found these figures hard to believe, but apparently they've been very well corroborated statistically, about 60% of those young people, once they turn 18, they're gone from active Christianity. Now, some of those folks may return when they have families or some life change, but many of them are going to stay gone, which leads us to a big call to action. If we don't do something to change the trend, Christianity in this continent in the future is going to look very different. And so in this show, we're going to be exploring ways to figure out how to change that trend. And I will give you a tip up front. A lot of it has to do with intergenerational mentoring. One generation mentoring the next generation. And that we've got to turn more away from programs and more towards an authentic, personal mentoring of the faith, one to another. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to be introducing some guests here in just a minute after the commercial break. I have with me some very exciting guests, some friends of mine, actually an old friend of mine and a new friend of mine that are going to be with us on the show. And we're looking forward to having them and their input. And so with that, we're going to leave that till after the break. And so let's talk about the millennials. If we can put that picture up about the missing millennials, those folks are the ones that we're really talking about tonight. If you notice, they're on their cell phones. They're the ones that don't seem to be paying attention. They're the ones that are very interconnected with their small group of friends. They're also the ones that are very connected with the large worldwide web we call the internet. And how do you communicate the gospel to people who are interested in all sorts of things, from pop science to music to maybe crypto biology to the latest things that the celebrities are doing? How do you break through that crust and communicate the eternal gospel to those folks in a way that's compelling enough for them to say, you know what, maybe I want to give Jesus a second thought. And that's what we're going to be trying to do tonight. We believe that Jesus is every bit as authentic in the 21st century as he's been for the past 20 centuries because of who he is and because of his timeless appeal to the different generational groups. Should be an exciting show tonight, and so we're going to go to commercial break, and with that, we'll see you in about 3 minutes.
This Saturday in the Tower District. This house is located at 1244 North Echo, 3 houses north of Olive in the heart of the Tower District. Stop by this Saturday between 1 and 3 p.m. or call 486-6758 or go to MikeBriggsProperties.com. See all Tower District listings by all agents at TowerDistrictProperties.com.
Located on Avenue 9, Toca Madera Winery's beautiful tasting room overlooks undulating hills covered with majestic vines, a perfect place to taste wine. Call Toca Madera Winery at 474-8286 or visit them on the web at TocaMaderaWinery.com.
No matter what you drive, sooner or later you're going to need tires. That means you. It's Wheel King, your custom wheel and tire headquarters for over 20 years. Hundreds of custom wheels and tires in stock all the time. Shocks, brake jobs, alignments, and lowering done the right way. The King has got you covered.
It's on wheels, see the King. No one else can get attention.
Call 225 King, Blackstone, just off the Shaw. It's Wheel King.
This segment brought to you by Roll Oil Fleet First Fuels. Save on time, labor, and loss from theft. With Fleet First Fuel, track your fleet fuel purchases with automatic accounting and accountability. Visit rolloil.com.
We are conveniently located across from Bullard High School on North Palm Avenue in Fig Garden. Morales Wellness Dental offers quality-oriented family dental care and service in a personalized and comfortable manner. As you enter our office, you'll always be greeted by our warm, caring dental team and will be invited to relax in our finely appointed lobby. We have 7 patient treatment suites that feature monitors for your in-op entertainment and diagnostic review. Our comfortable hygienist suites are the ideal setting for regular cleanings and checkups. As safety is our utmost priority, all instruments are put through our modern sterilization center. Furthermore, our sedation suite offers you both comfort and peace of mind during advanced dental procedures. And for your privacy, we have 2 separate patient consultation offices. Take the worry out of your next dental visit by calling us today. Experience our commitment to excellence, respect, and honesty at Morales Wellness Dental.
MPS Security, Fresno's premier private security and investigative services. They exceed expectations. Call them at 559-478-7747.
Are you currently shopping for solar? Give Solar Negotiators a call. You see, what they do is they fill downtime at a reduced rate to make sure that you always get the best deal. Don't find out later that you could have bought your solar for thousands of dollars less. Call Solar Negotiators.
If you're looking to go solar with confidence and have someone represent you in this transaction, give Solar Negotiators a call at 844-OWN-SOLAR or visit solarnegotiators.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Hey, welcome back to 21st Century Faith. And we'd like to have your comments about the topic we're talking about, the missing millennials from the church, the absent generation from active Christian faith. So if you want to leave a text message, 559-905-2621. If we have time, we'll try to deal with your comments on the air tonight. But before we do that, we've got some great guests with us tonight. An old friend of mine, Ken Johnson, who I served for 7 years with him at Campus Bible Church. I was adult ministries pastor, and he was children's ministry pastor. I believe that Ken's got something like more than 10 years worth of children's ministry under his belt. So he's got a very unique perspective on why young people may be leaving the church when they get to be 18 or 20 years of age. My new friend is Dave Dack. Now, when I was pastor in Lemoore at Grace Baptist Church some years ago, we had a lot of interaction with the United Presbyterian Church there in town, and Dave wasn't there yet, but he's now pastor of that church. I think you said going on 4 years you were pastor there. So welcome both of you to the show, and
Thank you.
Glad to have your time. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming. So guys, we're talking about the missing millennials, the absent generation from the church, and both of you've had some time to think about that. We've had some discussion about it. So when was it that you began to realize that we've got a problem with millennials leaving active Christian faith? Which one of you wants to go first?
Go, David. Well, I think I first began to notice it probably just when I started reading about it. I wasn't active in church leadership when this was first being studied. You also mentioned already some of the studies that have been done, the Barna Group, the Pew Research study. So when I started reading some of those studies, that's when I first sort of came onto this issue taking place of so many millennials leaving the church. And what struck me was simply the sheer amount of research being done on it, the church being desperate to figure out, why is this happening? What's causing this? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a church thing? So that's when I first noticed it and what struck me.
Well, yeah, and somebody must have just noticed it themselves some years ago, like maybe around the turn of this last century, because then they started in this active statistical research to kind of confirm and to figure out what was going on. How about you, Ken? When did you realize this?
Yeah, I would say I started realizing it when I graduated college in 2002, and I watched a lot of my own friends start disappearing from church. They were a part of church growing up, but then they started realizing, oh, this isn't for me, this isn't my thing, this isn't connecting in a way that it did when I was younger. And so I just started watching this dissipation of some of the people, and that was in 2002, progressed 10, 15 years later, and it's just further progressed the number of young people in that genre, that age group, who are just not there anymore. They're not present. Now, some are starting to come back because they're starting to make families and they start to say, oh, I think I want my kids to have something. But when they were turning 20 through 30, they just fell out of church.
Right. So how did you feel about that? How did you guys react to that?
For me, it was really disappointing because I was serving on church staff, and I was watching people who I was serving alongside with not wanting to be involved anymore, and not wanting to connect with Christian faith, not wanting to connect with their other believers in that manner. And that was really disappointing to me because I was getting such joy and passion out of it, and they were just not wanting to do it at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was similar, and in hindsight, I can certainly point to some of my own friends, because we're about the same age, watching some of my own friends leave the church as well. And I think, one of the things that it's forced me to do is kind of question a lot, because you have sort of this feeling of, a lot of my peers that I know and trust and that I like are leaving the church, so does that mean that I'm part of this irrelevant thing?
Right.
You sort of question, you feel some insecurity. Even if you still believe what you believe and have no doubts about that, there's still this sense of, am I part of this archaeological relic, or am I still part of something that's important?
Yeah. This really isn't on my question sheet, but since you brought it up, why did you find it relevant and your friends didn't?
Wow, that is a great question. I would say for me, it was a connection to something that was real, that was really important to me, and that was a connection through the messages that I was hearing. They were connecting, but I think a lot of it also was just the fact of being involved with Christian service, that I was seeing lives be impacted. I was seeing lives be changed. I was watching, whether it was kids or parents or families, in some way I was watching the gospel active in their lives, and that became very real for me, as opposed to those who perhaps checked out a little bit more. They didn't have that. They weren't engaging with opportunities to be involved with Christian service. They weren't engaging with opportunities to see the gospel active in people's lives. And so they started looking for that elsewhere. They started looking for some kind of life change elsewhere as opposed to in the gospel.
Interesting. So you're thinking serving has a big impact on your interest?
For myself.
Yeah, okay. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I think, for me, growing up in church or the Christian life, trying to follow Jesus Christ in your life, it was never merely an accessory, something that could be easily put off. It was it drove right to the core, not only of who I was, but who my parents are, my siblings, my whole church family. It's my whole world. And so I kind of saw it the same way as Ken did. This is not just some optional nice thing I can leave behind. This is the truth. This is the good news that we try to proclaim and live. And so it never really crossed my mind that it was even an option to leave it. And so I think seeing that faith lived by mentors, family, friends, is the same reason why it sort of stuck with me, but maybe not for some others.
Well, we talked about intergenerational mentoring as being really at the core of authentic faith for the 21st century. I'm thinking about that passage where it talks about, the older women should teach the younger women and older men should teach the younger men. Basically passing down the faith almost organically. Sure. And some people, they don't see that and they miss out on some of the real authentic experience.
And that text tends to be used, parents or even Sunday school teachers down to kids. Right. But I think what we're seeing with the millennials is we need people in their 40s and 50s doing that for people in their 20s and 30s who aren't connecting anymore. They're missing some kind of authenticity. They're missing some kind of reality in church and ministry and in the gospel. And so that text could then be applied and say, well, wait a minute, we need people in their 40s and their 50s to re-engage these young people who have disengaged themselves.
Right. Yeah, and Melinda, my guest last week, my wife, she was talking about some of the things we've been doing the last couple of years with young men, and just creating environments. It could be anything from fishing to baking cookies to, learning how to build a birdhouse. I mean, it could be almost anything. And one person suggested to me, why don't you have the millennials teach something to the older folks? But some kind of a situation where there's a common interest, and then you just share who you are in Jesus. Right. And that seems to be something that's very effective. Well, you guys are slightly older. I guess both of you guys would be on the very upper edge of this millennial generation we're talking about. I'm clearly a step up from that in terms of age. But where do you see as causing millennials to disengage? We've talked about lack of service, lack of opportunity to really get involved, but what else would you say?
One thing I think is happening, there are probably a lot of things that are going on, but I think one thing that's happening is we're talking about millennials leaving the Christian faith, but I would argue, and a lot of people are saying, that what many of them are actually leaving is probably not the authentic Christian faith.
Okay.
What they are leaving is probably some consumerized version of church and Christianity that no longer seems valuable or necessary to be who I want to be, a good citizen, whatever it might be. And so savvy consumers that millennials are, some of them have been raised in a faith that is just an accessory, a consumer accessory, and that's what they're leaving, as opposed to leaving an authentic expression of the Christian faith.
So do you think if somebody were to come along and say, Jesus will completely turn your life upside down, with that message, do you think that there's a possibility that many of them will want to reconsider?
I think so, especially if they see it. Their answer would be, well, prove it, or show me in what way. If I can see someone's life being turned upside down in a wonderful way, that's going to catch my attention.
Okay.
And I'll pay attention to that.
Fair enough, yeah.
Building on what you're talking about, I agree, and I would say, even push a little bit further, Jesus is very popular right now. Mm-hmm. And Jesus is extremely popular with young millennial age people. Now, maybe not Jesus in the form of organized religion, Christianity type thing, but Jesus himself, the things he did, the things he taught, the way he approached people, extremely popular. They're just not really grasping everything else that tends to be created to go along with Christianity instead of getting back to a core of Christianity, which is Jesus and the gospel.
Well, so give me an example of how young people are engaged with Jesus as a person, but not with the organization that surrounds him.
I would say some of the things that Jesus taught, his concern for the poor, his concern for the marginalized, those on the outside, that is, to me, that's the gospel, but that's also very popular with a lot of young people. They're reading authors who are highlighting the things of Jesus. I don't want to say downplaying, but certainly not emphasizing as strongly the other gospel or the other biblical authors, the other biblical material.
Like Paul and Peter and John.
Certainly. But the things of Jesus, what he did, who he hung out with, and the care for those who were on the outside of this core group, that's really people are really excited about that.
Well, and I think that's kind of the premise of this show, is that if people were just to see Jesus as to who he really was, they might have a little bit of a different perspective on what it means to follow him. So we got 1 minute left until the commercial break. You want to add anything to what we've been talking about so far? I know some of you guys have some ideas that might be kind of important to share, if you can do it in 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's a tough one. We'll get to those after the commercial break. We'll leave us a teaser for our audience.
Let's do that. All right, we'll see you in about 3 minutes.
Open house this Saturday in the Tower District. This house is located at 1244 North Echo, 3 houses north of Olive in the heart of the Tower District. Stop by this Saturday between 1 and 3 p.m. or call 486-6758 or go to MikeBriggsProperties.com. See all Tower District listings by all agents at TowerDistrictProperties.com.
This segment was brought to you by Equity Liquidators, quality home furnishing and accessories for every budget. Call Ray Ranta at 559-456-1629.
This segment is brought to you by Bulldog Burger Bistro. For the best burger in town, go to Bulldog Burger Bistro, located at Cedar and Barstow in the Bulldog Plaza Shopping Center.
I was having a lot of pain with intercourse to the point where I just stopped being sexually active. And I was hopeful that it would correct the problem, and it definitely corrected the problem.
Mona Lisa Touch offers a non-surgical approach to deliver long-lasting relief that is typically felt immediately after the treatment. Along with immediate results, the Mona Lisa Touch procedure is painless, with no downtime.
My message would be definitely try the Mona Lisa. It's worked for me, and I'm very, very happy.
From author Howard L. Trumbo, Should Saints of God Drink Wine? This book provides an easy-to-understand, biblically-based answer to the question, Should Saints of God Drink Wine? For more information and to order this book, call 559-392-6888.
Has the drought turned your lawn brown? Turf Medics will bring beautiful and natural color to any lawn year-round. Call Pro Turf at 559-495-1464.
Certifying foster homes for placement of children suffering from abuse, neglect, and abandonment. To help, contact Lisa Caceres with Angels of Grace at 559-268-0000.
This segment is brought to you by Auspice Home Care Solutions. For senior and elder in-home care, transportation services, or geriatric care management, contact Auspice Home Care Solutions.
From decorating your home to decorating your life, call Triple Diamond Director Susan Etchevis with Celebrating Home, formerly Home Interior, 559-626-0405.
Nerium International, breakthrough science, exclusive patented products that defy the signs of aging for your skin and your mind. Contact Christina Appleby with Nerium International at 559-321-6085.
If you are ready for a change and ready to make the commitment to begin the life you imagine for yourself, contact Angeline Corona at 559-341-4613.
Signature Creations will create custom images for all your marketing campaigns. You are your brand. Get visual. Call Signature Creations at 559-930-0807.
Hello, my name is Michael Bogart. Our goal at Mind Cuisine is to help you understand various topics and issues which impact our lives and our world.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to 21st Century Faith. We're here with Ken Johnson and Dave Dack, and we've been talking about the missing millennials from the church, the absent generation from active Christianity, and I hope you'll join us for this next segment. First question, guys, from your perspective, can you speak to how Christian parents feel when their children walk away from the faith that they were raised in?
As one who's served as a children's pastor, parents grieve over this. They've done everything they feel they can to lead their children correctly, and then watching that child make decisions that hurts them and grieves them, and then perhaps even they reject the faith or reject at least portions of the faith, certainly has a great impact on these parents.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, and you've probably spoken to many of them who, had their kids under your care, and then later on, yeah.
Yeah, and I would certainly say that I have. And in those situations, what I've seen is the parents trying to understand, well, wait a minute, what does my kid believe anymore? And sometimes the kid asking, what do I believe anymore? Maybe there's certain elements that they took for granted, and then they got to college or later on in life or certain life experiences and said, well, wow, gosh, maybe I don't believe those things anymore. But they still hold on to some of those core Christian elements. They just want to express them differently. They want to read the scriptures differently. They want to explore life a little differently. And with parents who are dealing with this, they are looking at going, is my kid even a believer anymore sometimes? The child, on the other hand, is starting to say, well, maybe I can learn to understand faith in a whole new way. Maybe this 21st century faith is understanding it for myself, not for my parents.
Well, and I think that's a big part of it. It's got to be the child's or the young person's faith,
Certainly.
young adult's faith, not them holding on to the faith of their parents.
Exactly.
Would you agree with that? I mean, from your perspective, Dave?
Yeah, I think so, mostly. I mean, to some extent, our faith is our own, but there's also a sense in which we inherit faith from parents, from the church, from mentors. So I think it's a little bit of both. But one thing that excuse me, that has fascinated me is that sometimes this crisis of faith for the child or college student, whatever age this happens, also presents a crisis of faith for their parents.
Oh boy, is that true.
And so not only is the child, the student, questioning what do I believe, but the parent starts questioning, well, what do I believe? Because I think there's this sense of helplessness, seeing their child leave the faith, and so the parent wants to know, what do I do? What do I teach?
Where did I go wrong?
Yeah,
Right.
and then they realize, I'm not even sure what I should teach or where I went wrong or what to do in this situation. So it presents a crisis of faith for both generations sometimes.
Do you think that might be a good thing?
I think so. I think it's an excellent thing because sometimes there's a perspective, I was reading just earlier before I came in, sometimes there's a perspective that when people doubt certain things in their faith, that's bad. But doubt is where you build faith. Doubt is where the faith fills in those gaps. It fills in those holes. It fills in those areas to say, you know what, I do trust. I do have confidence in this. If everything is a checklist, you can answer all the questions and everything is perfectly, where's the room for faith?
Right.
So you have an expansion of faith by saying, there's a little bit of doubt there. There's a little bit of wiggle room. There's a little bit to say, I'm not fully sure about that, but I'm going to trust in God to provide. That to me is wonderful.
There's a book that I'm not sure exactly when it was written, I think late Middle Ages, by St. John of the Cross, called The Dark Night of the Soul. Boy, that's a tough one to read, but the journey of Dark Night of the Soul back to faith is a really heartwarming and encouraging one, because I think a lot of people go through that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of what we're talking about with this generation as well. So let's talk about how the absent generation is impacting the church. What's that looking like in terms of demographics? I mean, you're a pastor of a thriving, long-standing church, Dave. How's the lack of millennial involvement impacting what you're doing?
Well, I think it's forcing all of us, I mean, all churches, including our own, it's forcing us to ask different questions, better questions. It's in some ways, it's giving us as a larger church a crisis of faith and saying, oh, what happened? What do we do? And that's, like Ken said, that can be a great thing. That can be the occasion for learning perhaps what we've been doing wrong or neglecting, and exploring new ways of, not just doing church, but new ways of experiencing God, being a faithful follower of Christ in today's world, and demonstrating that to not just ourselves, but to the next generation. So it's forcing us to ask those questions in a way that, in this country at least, the church has not had to ask until the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, our parents' generation, they had World War II and the Korean War, and they had all of that upheaval of the civil rights movement that was causing our country to really go through a major transformation. They had to work through all of that. They had the threat of, nuclear missiles. We grew up, myself included, but especially your generation, we grew up in a very safe, apart from Vietnam, safe kind of, life goes on, there's not much of a major threat, and maybe that hasn't been good for us. I really wonder sometimes. So what about workers? Let's say you need a third grade Sunday school teacher, and you know, it would be nice to have that 20-something step up, but there aren't that many 20-somethings to step up. So speak to that issue.
Well, I would say with that one, you're dealing with people who aren't there, people who aren't present, and so you're stuck in a situation where you'd love to have those people involved. As I talked about earlier with Christian Service, a chance for them to experience Christianity through the lives of these kids even, but unfortunately you can't recruit what doesn't exist. And so if this group, this missing millennials, truly is this void of Christianity, you've got to reach other areas. You've got to be either going for younger or you've got to be going for older, but unfortunately that group isn't there. The church needs to be reaching these people. They need to be ministering to them. They need to be doing everything they can to reach out to this young group, this missing group, and find ways for them to be involved with Christian service, find ways for them to be involved with what God is doing. But it's really hard to try to recruit if they're not even present.
Well, now, Melinda and I were visiting a church up in Spokane, well, it was about 2-3 months ago. And this church was doing what, you know, at least the way I was trained and the way that we served, all of us have probably served, you get people to come to faith and then you put them to work. That's the model that I was trained with, and that's the model that I worked with. This church was doing it exactly the opposite. Put them to work and see them come to faith, which was a very different idea and hard for me to really get my head around at first. Do you think there's any merit to that?
You know, my first thought was imagining what it was like for the disciples that Jesus called, you know, just ordinary fishermen, not notable people of society. And the first thing he did was he'd teach them little bits, but he'd put them to work. He'd teach them, put them to work. He didn't, you know, teach them everything that was going to happen in his death and resurrection. He didn't teach them all the doctrine that would be the doctrine of the church. He didn't do theology with them right off the bat. So, I mean, maybe that's an example, a model that in some ways fits pretty close to what Jesus himself did, which is come and see. Come and see this in action.
Right.
And to build on that, a lot of times the millennials are looked at as being very selfish and self-centered and all they want is themselves. I don't think that's actually all that true either. I mean, they're a very volunteering group. They're a people group who's very concerned about world issues.
And about their own friends.
And about their own friends, exactly. And so this is a group that you could use that potentially as a model to say, you know what, here's chances for you to be involved. Well, to give you an example, we had a tutoring program at campus where we would recruit students from the local college. Some are of faith, some are not, but you know what? We gave them opportunities to be involved, and they loved it. They loved being involved with these kids. Now, extending Christ to them and sharing Christ with them through that process is a wonderful way to do that, but there's a little model of something that we did do in the past.
Huh. Well, and as I remember it, the first thing Jesus said to those fishermen was, I'm going to make you fishers of men. So it was a task-oriented call. It wasn't really a theologically oriented call at first. So maybe there's something to think about there. We'll have to kind of work this around in the brain and see if it might fit. So what are some of your ideas for drawing young people back to active Christian faith? Have you seen something that works? Have you tried something and it worked? What are your ideas?
Well, I mean, I think we could probably both say we've seen lots of different attempts at doing something different to attract millennials back to church. Some of these ideas are very innovative, very effective. Some of them are borderline just plain weird.
Can you give me an example of borderline just weird or what?
Well, I mean, there's this whole spectrum of, and you see our churches, some churches desperately just trying things, which is not necessarily bad. Again, that could be a good thing.
Right.
But, you know, there's a part of me that also wants to check a little bit against this idea that millennials are somehow this unique species of human that is completely different from any other human being.
Right.
I think they and any other generation, however you label it, have most things in common with most other people. We're all still people. And so one of the things that I do see millennials still responding to is an invitation.
Yeah.
An invitation by a friend, by someone they know and trust. Hey, come to church with me. Come to this mission trip with me. Come to whatever it might be. If it's a personal invitation, that is still statistically one of the most likely ways a new person will come to church. And I think millennials are no exception to that.
Yeah, and to push that a little bit further, what I would say is even an opportunity to go beyond come to church. But it's
Absolutely.
join me for
Because
this.
that's consumeristic, isn't it?
It's a little consumeristic, and it
Can
can be
be.
a little scary. Like, wait a minute, what kind of church is this? What type of things do they teach? And am I going to be able to darken the doors and they're going to hang me? What's going to happen? On the other hand, you say, you know what? Join me for this group. Join me for this study. I've even heard, join me for this time at the bar, or pub church, things like that.
Holy smokes.
Holy smokes and Holy Spirits.
Holy Spirits,
I've
yeah.
heard of those too. So those types of things are actually rather attractive, because I don't want to say it's exclusively because it was so wrong before, once they got to an older age, like, well, maybe I can't get away with these things. But it's, you know what, this is real life. These are real people meeting in real places doing real life things. I want to be a part of that.
So there's all sorts of opportunities then for people to say, come and, like Jesus said, come and see.
Yeah.
And we say, come and see. I mean, see that he's made a difference in our lives. Do you think that people are put off by what we would call a Christian testimony? Here's what Jesus has done in my life. Here's the changes he's made in my life. Are people interested in that, or are they turned off by that?
I think they're interested overall, in general. I think people want to hear other stories. I think people want to hear stories of Christians and the difference it's made in their life, and why that's important to them. But keeping in mind that millennials and just people in general have a sharp nose for what's authentic and what's not.
Okay, so the canned,
this is what my testimony is supposed to sound like.
Okay, right. Uh-huh.
This is the right answer testimony.
Right.
Even if it's true, if it comes off as these are the right answers, these are the check boxes that have been checked, that probably won't have much of an impact. But when it's someone's real story, it will be paid attention to, I think.
Okay. Authenticity, I think, is
Absolutely.
the watchword, isn't it? So describe some of the things you're doing yourself, in your church, in your ministry that you've been involved in. What were some things that you were doing? You've got 1 minute till the break. So can you sandwich that in?
I can say very briefly, one of the things that I'm trying to do, that we're trying to do at our church, is to develop the Christian leadership that is there.
Okay.
The people that are in the church, equip them for not just sitting in church, but being in ministry.
Right.
And I would say one thing that works really well as well, kind of on the mentoring idea you were talking about, which is taking the time to listen to their concerns and taking the time to address the needs and say, you know what? You're not off base there when they think something slightly differently. Or you know what? There's another way to read that text. There's another way to understand it. And when you start hearing, when someone starts hearing there's another way to understand things, there's another way to look at things, it can really free up their openness to the gospel, their openness to Christianity.
Okay. We got to take a commercial break. We'll see you back in 3 minutes. Don't go away. I got another question for these guys.
Open house this Saturday in the Tower District. This house is located at 1244 North Echo, 3 houses north of Olive in the heart of the Tower District. Stop by this Saturday between 1 and 3 p.m. or call 486-6758 or go to MikeBriggsProperties.com. See all Tower District listings by all agents at TowerDistrictProperties.com.
Located on Avenue 9, Toca Madera Winery's beautiful tasting room overlooks undulating hills covered with majestic vines, a perfect place to taste wine. Call Toca Madera Winery at 474-8286 or visit them on the web at TocaMaderaWinery.com.
No matter what you drive, sooner or later you're going to need tires. That means you. It's Wheel King, your custom wheel and tire headquarters for over 20 years. Hundreds of custom wheels and tires in stock all the time. Shocks, brake jobs, alignments, and lowering done the right way. The King has got you covered.
Inside the wheel, see the King. No one else can get attention.
Call 225-KING. Blackstone, just off the Shaw. It's Wheel King.
This segment brought to you by Roll Oil Fleet First Fuels. Save on time, labor, and loss from theft. With Fleet First Fuel, track your fleet fuel purchases with automatic accounting and accountability. Visit rolloil.com.
We are conveniently located across from Bullard High School on North Palm Avenue in Fig Garden. Morales Wellness Dental offers quality-oriented family dental care and service in a personalized and comfortable manner. As you enter our office, you'll always be greeted by our warm, caring dental team and will be invited to relax in our finely appointed lobby. We have 7 patient treatment suites that feature monitors for your in-op entertainment and diagnostic review. Our comfortable hygienist suites are the ideal setting for regular cleanings and checkups. As safety is our utmost priority, all instruments are put through our modern sterilization center. Furthermore, our sedation suite offers you both comfort and peace of mind during advanced dental procedures. And for your privacy, we have 2 separate patient consultation offices. Take the worry out of your next dental visit by calling us today. Experience our commitment to excellence, respect, and honesty at Morales Wellness Dental.
MPS Security, Fresno's premier private security and investigative services. They exceed expectations. Call them at 559-478-7747.
Are you currently shopping for solar? Give Solar Negotiators a call. You see, what they do is they fill downtime at a reduced rate to make sure that you always get the best deal. Don't find out later that you could have bought your solar for thousands of dollars less. Call Solar Negotiators.
If you're looking to go solar with confidence and have someone represent you in this transaction, give Solar Negotiators a call at 844-OWN-SOLAR or visit solarnegotiators.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Hey, welcome back to our final segment tonight of 21st Century Faith. And this is what we always reserve for our mentoring moment. You know, my mom and dad are still in good health and are still mentoring me into my middle age, for which I'm very grateful. And my dad's agreed to write pretty much a weekly column or a little segment that he calls Letters from Mount Olivet for this mentoring moment. So I'm going to just share this with you. These are my dad's words. And he said, "Hi, son. Mom and I just returned from your niece's high school graduation down south in Border City. And it was a memorable experience for all 22 members of the graduating class, as well as for all the friends and relatives who attended. The Living Gospel High School is private, but related to the First Fundamentalist Church of Border City. After the usual pomp and circumstance, the order of service proceeded as follows. The superintendent offered a word of welcome and congratulations, followed by a vocal solo, after which the principal introduced the faculty. Next, as a courtesy, the pastor of FFC was to make a few brief remarks to the graduates. And after that, the valedictorian and salutatorian delivered short speeches, and then diplomas were awarded. Well, all went along smoothly until the pastor made his remarks. And for 20 minutes, he ranted and raved, threw up his arms upward and sideways, telling the graduates that the devil lurked in the world they were about to enter, and that almost all the colleges they were planning to attend were evil. It was first-class fire and brimstone. After he finished, there was a scattering of applause. However, I believe the good reverend had missed his mark. Many in the audience were intimidated by his tent revival approach. As we left the ceremony, many of us felt the pastor's presentation was intimidating and too long. You'll remember that during the years you and your brothers were growing up, we were churchgoers. We attended and belonged to a number of churches. Our attendance and membership demonstrated our commitment to several communities of Christians. As we moved from place to place, your mom and I tried to have our family join with others who shared our Christian beliefs and behavior. Attending a specific church does not necessarily mean one's a Christian, although I believe it's a strong indication that those who do are believers. Was that type of a sermon appropriate for a graduation ceremony? Was it effective? Did it show the love and the grace and the hope of Christ? I have my reservations. One's faith is really a personal matter. Each of us has to decide and hopefully demonstrate his or her faith, not by what's in their minds only, but also by their behavior and treatment of others. Each of us has sinned and will sin again, I'm afraid. As sinners, our salvation is the knowledge that Jesus Christ bore the burden of our sins by his torturous death on the cross. Truth is, God's blessed me, and I know he's blessed you too. Well, son, that's about it from Mount Olivet this week. Take care, stay safe, and God bless your dad. Well, I wasn't there at the event, but I sometimes wonder if we sometimes don't understand the appropriateness of how to deliver the gospel message in different circumstances. And so we're going to start with our guests here again. The subject was brought up, well, what is a Christian? You know, how do you define the term Christian, especially in light of all the negative images? So what would you guys say to that? If I were to say to you, define what it means to be a true Christian.
For me, a Christian is one who follows Christ. It's one whose Lord of their life is Christ. He is the decision maker of all things, and it's not being identified as this person's a certain denomination, this person's a certain branch of Christianity, but as someone who chooses to follow Christ. And to me, that is one who is a Christ follower or a Christian. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, that's an excellent definition of a Christian, and I think for many people the follow-up question is, well, how do I follow Jesus? What does that mean?
Right, exactly.
Which, of course, would take a long time to go fully into, but the only part I would add is that I think part of being a Christian, a Christ follower, is, you know, someone who, in terms of what they believe about Jesus, they believe Jesus' own claims about himself.
Right.
You know, such as, you know, he said that he was God, that he was one with the Father. He said that he came to die for our sins. I mean, he said certain things about himself that would not be optional for someone who's trying to follow.
So you can't really
Jesus.
redefine who Jesus is and be an authentic, biblical Christian at least.
Right, and I see a lot of attempts to do that these days, to say, well, I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus, but really we're trying to redefine it to something we're comfortable with and still call it Christianity. But I think to truly be a Christian, we have to let Jesus define himself and go along with that.
So does a true Christian's life have to look a certain way? I mean, maybe that's one of the real core issues in why people ask that question. I mean, in other words, do they have to vote a certain way? Do they have to, you know, cut their hair a certain way? Do they have to wear a certain style of clothing to be really...
I was going to say yes until you went there. Yeah, a true Christian does look a certain way. It's someone who does what Jesus did.
Okay, so we're not talking about physical appearance.
No. We're not talking about physical appearance, we're not talking about skin color or political affiliation, but we are talking about someone who loves the poor, feeds the hungry, heals the sick. Those things are what Christ did. Those things are what make someone a true
Well, you know,
Christ
Jesus got accused of hanging around with all the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what a true Christian should look like, hanging around with the wrong people?
Absolutely.
You think so, really? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. What kind of wrong people should we be hanging around with?
Well, look who Jesus hung out with. Jesus hung out with those who he was accused of being a drunkard and a glutton. So he went to a lot of parties.
So Jesus was a party presence.
It seems to be. Jesus hung out with the tax collectors and the prostitutes. He was the one who hung out with the seedy people, if you will. And yet, when it comes to someone who a lot of people who identify themselves as Christian today, those are the type of people they don't hang out with. This is the type of people they don't associate with. And yet, I think these millennials are looking at this going, well, wait a minute. Jesus said this, you're doing this. This doesn't mesh for me.
Well, and of course, you know, let me speak for the traditional, you know, the Christians. They don't want to be influenced by what they consider to be bad behavior or, you know, unbiblical practices, that sort of thing. But clearly, Jesus wasn't influenced by those people. They were drawn to him because he offered them what? Hope?
Yeah.
And a new life, and a chance to be clean again, and a chance to get out from under the burden of all the regulations that they were under. I mean, isn't that what we're really talking about? Yeah. So I don't know, do you think Jesus sought them out, or do you think they were drawn to him?
I think it was both. I mean, Jesus sought them out, and when they saw that, they saw something compelling like they'd never seen before. Certainly not in the religious establishment, the pastors of their day. They weren't doing that. So I think it's both. Jesus went to people, and then that was in turn compelling, because then the crowd started coming to him when they heard what he was doing. You know, I think it's one thing to rightly say that, you know, I or we as Christians don't want to be influenced by certain things out there in the world. That's fine. But it's another thing to say, I am afraid of it, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to get near it. I don't see Jesus doing that. I think that's a mistake that we can sometimes make. You know, I think a Christian who is afraid to be near sinners is like a doctor that's afraid to walk into a hospital.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
You know,
wow.
I mean, that's where you need to go.
So in other words, if we've got a healing message, we need to be around people who want to be healed. And sometimes, you know, it seems like we as Christians, we get involved with other people who are more or less well, and we avoid the people who are not well.
And returning to the subject of millennials, I think millennials are paying attention to that. I think they're looking at that. They're seeing Christians who want to hang out with Christians and don't want to hang out with anyone else who might make them dirty or unclean. And yet, these millennials that might identify themselves as slightly dirty and unclean, and they're wanting that. They're wanting that in their lives, and so they're needing that in some way, but they're not seeing it from the church.
Well, you know, and I think about that episode in one of the Gospels, I can't remember which one, where Mary Magdalene, Mary was at Jesus' feet weeping, and evidently heavily weeping, so that there was a lot of moisture, and then wiping her hair, using her hair to wipe Jesus' feet clean. I mean, that's repentance. That's a woman who finally found some hope in her life. And maybe that's something we're not doing a very good job of today. Do you think maybe that's possible? We got 1 minute.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. And part of that is because, you know, I use the analogy of, you know, a doctor being afraid to walk into a hospital. And there's some truth to that, but at the same time, I'm also sick. I have been sick and still am. You know, even Christians we are not perfect, and that needs to be said right up front.
Right.
That we are part of the crowd Jesus came to save.
Right. Well, guys, this has been way too good to cut it off here. So we're going to have you guys back in a future week. So I'm going to commit you on air. Are we on for that? Okay, all right, very good.
We're on.
Guys, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for watching tonight. This is not the last about this subject, but join us again next week, Wednesday night, 6 to 7 o'clock. For Aspect Ministries 21st Century Faith. And don't forget to check out www.mindcuisine.com for all of our educational videos and products. See you next week.
Thanks so much for joining us on today's 21st Century Faith. Mike Bogart would love to hear from you. So if you have any questions or you'd like to dialogue with Mike, please feel free to use the contact information you see on the screen. And we hope you'll come back and bring a friend to the next program of 21st Century Faith.
This Saturday in the Tower District. This house is located at 1244 North Echo, 3 houses north of Olive in the heart of the Tower District. Stop by this Saturday between 1 and 3 p.m. or call 486-6758 or go to MikeBriggsProperties.com. See all Tower District listings by all agents at TowerDistrictProperties.com.
Located on Avenue 9, Toca Madera Winery's beautiful tasting room overlooks undulating hills covered with majestic vines, a perfect place to taste wine. Call Toca Madera Winery at 474-8286 or visit them on the web at tocamaderawinery.com.
No matter what you drive, sooner or later you're going to need tires. That means you. It's Wheel King, your custom wheel and tire headquarters for over 20 years. Hundreds of custom wheels and tires in stock all the time. Shocks, brake jobs, alignments, and lowering done the right way. The King has got you covered.
Inside the wheel, see the King. No one else can get attention.
Call 225-KING, Blackstone, just off the Shaw. It's Wheel King.
This segment brought to you
CentralValleyTalk.com